Pasuk says in this week's parsha in Yud Beis Yud Daled, Kim b'makom asher yivchar Hashem. That we have to bring the korbanos specifically in the Beis Hamikdash. That's what the pasuk over here is discussing. The Sefer HaChinuch, the Chinuch in Mitzvah Tov Mem discusses this, and he says that we're obligated to bring the korbanos specifically in the Beis Hamikdash and not outside of the Beis Hamikdash. The Chinuch then continues and basically explains in short the reason for this is the Beis Hamikdash is the heart. It is the spiritual place where we all gather to gain a higher level of spirituality, to become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore it's the designated location. See over there for more details. And then he says that this applies to all genders and at all times, surprisingly enough. And someone who violates this transgresses this mitzvah, which is very interesting because we don't even have a Beis HaMikdash nowadays, and we can't even bring a korban. But nevertheless, if you do so, says the chinuch, you still violate this. A lot of lumdus in that. Based on this, just want to point out that the Gemara in Zvachim on Kuf Zayin Amud Beis says the concept of kedusha rishoyna kidsha l'shaisa v'kidsha l'ased lavo, which means that the Beis Hamikdash, where it stood, the Kaisel Hamaravi, where everyone goes in Eretz Yisrael, the one wall that's still standing from the Beis Hamikdash, it still has a holiness to it. There's a lot of Torahs as to why specifically the Beis Hamikdash, even though we don't have it, is still a holy location, whereas where we receive the Torah, nothing going on over there. That's another discussion of itself. Based on this, let's take the next 14 minutes to discuss over here some very practical and relevant points about the Mizbeach, which still applies nowadays. The Gemara in the 9th parak of Brachos, on Nun Dalet Amud Beis, going on to the next Amud, says that if a person has long meals, Amar of Yehuda Shloisha Devarim Marichin Yomu V'Shenoisa Shel Adam. There are three things that increase a person's life. Longevity. And one of the things that increases a person's life, says the Gemara, is Hamarich al Shulchano, which means someone that has a long meal. Hamarich al Shulchano. He has a long meal. Cryptic Gemara over there. The Gemara then, after a little bit of discussion, explains why. Dilma asi anya v'yehevle. A poor person might come and then you'll be able to give him from your meal, from what you're eating. And then the Gemara quotes, because the pasuk says, "Hamizbeach eitz shalosh amos gava." You had the mizbeach, and then the pasuk says, "Uksiv yedaber elai zeh hashulchan ashalifnei Hashem." So the Gemara is bothered by pasuk ben mizbeach sayim b'shulchan. You're talking about the mizbeach in both places. One place you call it a mizbeach, the other place you call it a table. Which one is it? The Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan v'Rabbi Elazar dami travayu. When the Beis Hamikdash was around, the Mizbeach would atone for the Jews. But now our table atones for us. What type of atonement's happening at the table over here? We're eating. So the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Kuf Samach Zayin Sifkot and Lamed explains this atonement happens when we give our food to poor people. Like the Gemara was saying, that's the atonement. Now, let's say there's no poor people. Doesn't happen often nowadays on residential real estate in the middle of a meal. You have someone who's knocking at the door and asking. Could happen, but doesn't happen often. So the Piskei Teshuvos in Kuf Samach Zayin, in footnote 49, explains that if there's no poor person, separate money to give to charity later on. To give to a poor person. The Shar HaTzion over there, also by the Chafetz Chaim, same as the Mishnah Berurah, and Sifkot and Chaf Hey, in that same simon says, the atonement happens by speaking out Torah ideas. Say Dvar Torah during when you're eating. And the Ein Yaakov and Menachos Ansadi Zayin says that you do both. You could give to the poor person, and you have the Torah, and that helps with the atonement. This actually reminds me by Pesach, Ma'os Chitim. Why is it so important? There's an idea of you give wheat or something that's more readily consumable, something that could be consumed easier and quicker. There's a better idea than giving money because money, there's extra steps to buy the food. If you get the food, it's closer to getting pleasure. Same thing over here. I'll get pleasure immediately. There's a lot about that all over the place. But perhaps another reason for the longevity is a practical reason when it comes to just being healthy in general. The doctor of all doctors, the Rambam says in Hilchos Deos, Perek Dalet Halacha Gimel, the Rambam says, "La'olam kishayochel adam yeshib b'makaymo yatala small." When you eat, you should sit down when you eat. V'lo yahalech, v'lo yerka, v'lo yagia, v'lo yezazeh aguf, v'lo yatayel. Ad sheyisachel hamozun shebemeyav. Don't walk, don't run around when you're eating. Don't ride, he says. Probably referring to a donkey. Question is, would this apply nowadays also in vehicles where it's smoother experience for the most part? When you're going 75 cruising on a highway, is that much better than going 8 miles per hour on a donkey? Maybe it's still smoother. What to look into there? If the Rambam meant also in a vehicle nowadays or on a train, on a plane, etc. But okay, fine. Lo yizazeh gupo. Don't move your body around. Don't exercise when you're in the middle of eating. Don't take a trip. Wait for everything to get digested, says the Rambam. V'kol hamatayel achel achiloso shiagi. Anyone who just he starts moving around a lot when he eats and all of these things, or he doesn't let the food digest and he's already running around all over the place. Or he's a mevi al atzmo chaloyim ro'im. The kashim, you're bringing sicknesses onto yourself, says the Rambam. That's not good for you. So it's very interesting when you open the Mishnah Torah and you look in the Rambam. It's very interesting because you look at the Mefarshim on the side. What's the source of the Rambam? You know what you see? Nothing. So where's the Rambam coming from? This is very practical. This happens every single day of our life. So if you look in the Sefer, Aim Habanim, he says a beautiful idea and a beautiful source for this Rambam. This is written by Rabbi Moshe Chaim, and he died in 1845. He was from Izmir, it seems like. Anyways, the doctors, he says, say that it's not correct to walk immediately after eating. Let the food digest and then stand up. You travel slowly. Someone who's going to do so, he's going to become sick, premature death. And then he says the Gemara statement of having long meals and it will lead to longevity is alluding to this concept. You'll have longevity. Why? Because you're going to be healthier. It's a practical reason. Someone who has long meals, it's assumed that he's not going to move immediately after eating. And he probably is going to be following what these doctors and what the Rambam is saying, and that will cause longevity and not the premature death. His food will properly digest. Okay? Those are a few ideas of why having a long Suda could lead to longevity. The Ben Yehoyada explains over here, we're not talking about years. We're not talking about you're going to live till 119. That could happen. But we have to realize there's ifus and there's kamus. Quantitative and qualitative over here. We're talking about qualitatives, says the Ben Yehoyada. This means he's not going to have any worry. One day of a person's life when he doesn't have worry, when everything is going good, that could be equivalent to 7 days of another person's life with all the worry, all the issues that he has. And similarly, the reverse way, rather conversely, a day in the life of someone who has worries, the whole day could be considered like 1 hour. It's not quality. And then the Ben Ish Chai says, alluded to this before, this charity is better than just giving the money because it's going to get closer to get pleasure. You don't need to now take that money and buy it and go to a store or order it and they deliver it. The food's already over there. Done, finished. That's why it's better. And the merit of that explains the Ben Yehoyada, the Ben Ish Chai, he'll get longevity in a qualitative manner. He's going to sleep well, he's going to eat great. And therefore, you won't have pain or worry. Lastly, on this topic, the Shnois Chaim and Parshas Pekudei on Kuf Dalet explains, we're not talking about the person's going to get an atonement for having a long meal and he's stuffing his face with all types of food and indulging in the physicalities of this world. That's not what we're discussing. That's certainly not an atonement. That's why the Gemara specifically didn't say that he has a long meal. Rather, the Gemara says he's long on his table. Meaning he hopes that by increasing his meal, it will increase the odds of a poor person coming to his meal. That demonstrates humility. And therefore, because he's unnecessarily increasing the length of his meal just because that a poor person might come along, that's similar to korbanos. They try to make the person humble. Person's bringing in the korban instead of himself. Let's talk about a totally miscellaneous halacha. Listen to this one. It says over here, over where? The Magen Avraham in Siman Kuf Samach Zayin Sivkot in Yud Gimel, as well as the Shara Tzion quotes this in Sivkot and Chavav in that same Siman. They're all quoting from a Sefer Chassidim in Siman Kuf Beis. It's also to kill a kina, a louse, which is the single tense for lice. You're not allowed to kill that on your table. Kaf HaChaim says we're not just talking about lice checking over here before school, the season that we're at now. This applies to a flea or any other bug. You're not allowed to kill it on the table. They go through practically. You see a bug, it's climbing up. You're not going to kill it. Look, if you could, you blow the thing off and then you kill it on the floor if you need to, whatever it is. Or, you do it in a way. Maybe you don't actually kill it till it's wrapped up in the tissue. But there's an idea of not killing it. Why? Because the table is like a mizbeach. We wouldn't kill a bug on the mizbeach. The Aruch HaShulchan says, don't do anything that's disgusting on the table in Os Yud Beis. Don't do anything, because it's like a mizbeach. And the Sefer Chasidim in Siman 920, Tav Kuf Chaf. Sefer Chasidim just looked at it yesterday. He says, do not, he's actually really talking about a table what you use in your house for learning on, but certainly applies to a table you eat on as well. Don't put the children on the table. Don't let them walk there. Don't let them go on. I got 4 kids on the age of 5. I know all about this. Don't let them on. They all know. Not on the table. Because it's a mizbeach. You don't have kids sitting on you see sometimes the parents, the grandparents, they put them on the table. The kids' tuchus is on there. They get leaks out of the diaper. What is this? This is the mizbeach. Come on. Anyways, now the Ramah says, let's talk about something a little saltier. The Ramah says that you should bring salt to the table. Why? Because the table's like a mizbeach. There was salt when it came to the korbanos. So too, you bring it to the table. Even though our bread's salted, doesn't matter. You still bring it. The Arizal says that this is done for Kabbalistic reasons. Where did I see this Arizal quoted? This is quoted actually by the Bear Hativ in Kuf Samach Zayin Os Ches over there. This is the idea over here, even if it's already salted for Kabbalistic reason. The Medrash says, Tosfos quotes this in Brachos quote all over the place. Medrash says when the Jews are when we're waiting for everyone to wash on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we're just sitting there. What are we doing? Shouldn't be learning Torah then either. What are you going to do? You're just sitting for everyone. What's going on? Whole question, reading from a sefer, thinking about, okay, maybe thinking we could already come on to it, maybe not, whole discussion. But anyways, what are we going to have? We don't have any mitzvahs with us. Says Taisvas, quoting the Medrash, it's the bris melech, the covenant of salt that will protect us. It says in Shulchan Aruch, though, at the end of Siman Kuf Ayin, that all of our bread is salted. So then what's the story over here with the salt? There's still a mitzvah to bring salt to the table. And according to Mikubalim, you should dip the challah thrice into the salt. Yeah. What? Yeah, that's what I just said. According to Mikubalim, the Mishnah Berurah quotes, you dip it thrice. Why 3 times? Here's why. What? Very good. Yod Kei Vav Kei times 3 is equivalent to Melech and what else? And Lechem. Very good. In the back. 3 points over there on the report card. So therefore, that's one idea. And when you dip it in, so then what happens? You also have the gevura gets sweetened by the chesed, by the kindness, sweets up the strength over there. That's the idea. If you don't have salt, there's an idea of dipping it in something else. Other than sugar, don't dip it in sugar. Shilas and Shuvas Mishnah Halachos, Chelik Yud Siman Mem Ches explains, salt isn't eaten by itself. It's eaten with something else. Salt symbolizes connection, unity. Same idea when we wait for others to wash our hands, based on the Tosfos we just quoted, the Medrash, we're connecting with others. That demonstrates that we have friendship. We're unable to eat without others. Unity, very important. That will protect us from the prosecution of the Satan. Last topic. Try to do it in 1 minute. I don't know. Shulchan Aruch says that there's a custom to cover the knife during benching. This is in Siman Kuf Pei at the end of the Siman. However, not on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Why? What's the reason behind this? The Rokeach says that knives shorten a person's life. The Mizbeach ones is the table is like a Mizbeach which increases life. Something that decreases life shouldn't go on something that increases life. That's a well-known idea. The Magen Avraham says since that on Shabbos we don't build the Mizbeach, so therefore the knife where you're not allowed to build it, so therefore the knife doesn't need to be covered on Shabbos. Also, he says only a metal knife. Shiboli haleket is quoted all over the place by Beis Yosef. Mishnah Berurah quotes a story with Rabbi Simcha, Rabbi Simcha, who says that there's a story of someone who was benching. He got to the bracha b'nei Yerushalayim, stabbed himself. He was so upset that we don't have the Beis Hamikdash. According to that reason, the knife should be covered on Shabbos and Yontif as well. Comes along the Taz and says, no, that story only happened on Shabbos, therefore it only happened, during the week, therefore you only need to cover it during the week itself. That itself is a whole discussion, but that is the idea of the Taz, and he brings proofs from the Gemara by other cases. The question is, there's a whole discussion if you need to cover it at night, because the Beis Hamikdash can't be built at night. So there's a whole discussion about that. I don't want to hold everyone up for Mariv, but that is there's more on that. Why specifically during benching, not during the whole meal? You might come to stab yourself only during benching. That's another discussion. Another discussion is Shabbos and Yontif. You don't need to cover it because it's like the next world. There's immortality. People are going to be immortal. And Rav Chaim Kanievsky says that you do not need to cover your knife during Shalosh Shudas, even though you're benching after Shabbos, which is very interesting. However, Chol HaMoed, he says you would, and you should cover your knife when you bench, even if your friend is still eating. If you look at the Aruch HaShulchan, says he just said you don't need to be careful nowadays with covering your knife at all. Very interesting idea. Anyways, hope everyone enjoyed what we did tonight. I thought it was very practical stuff.